Welcome to Coffee with Bible and Pop Culture. There is a space for everyone at this table. We are here to ask hard questions, to have honest conversations, and to journey together. We're here to talk about the things that matter most to us and to remind you that you're not alone. Our heart behind this time is to ask hard questions and to really dialogue about what we're going through. Let's engage, explore, and enjoy. Good morning, Bible and Pop Culture family. Thank you for joining us for Coffee with Bible and Pop Culture this morning. We're going to give everybody a few seconds to grab your cup, get comfortable. We are so excited for today's chat with Tamra and Andress. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We're so excited to have you guys.
Good morning.
Tamra, where are you coming from this morning?
So I am alive and in action from Virginia Beach, Virginia. So Eastern Standard Time. And I think it's essential that we know that you are not on Eastern Standard Time. And so kudos. And thank you for being here. It's so bright and early.
It is. So I'm so excited.
And you're from you're tuning in from where?
I'm tuning in from Hilo, Hawaii.
Hawaii. Okay, I've never been. Must go. I've heard such incredible things. I want to do one of those like 1 month stays though. Yeah. And so I need it to like fully carve out for my kids and I to just hike every possible peak there is.
Yes, absolutely. And every island is so unique. So yeah.
Have you been there your whole life?
No, I grew up in Washington State, in Olympia, Washington.
Okay, so still on the West Coast. Did you go to Hawaii when you were little, like growing up?
No, I went the summer before my sophomore year or junior year.
Okay.
As a nanny. And so I blame that family for
wow.
all of my Hawaii life after that.
That's so amazing. How cool. I hope my kids do stuff like that. I mean, I know they've already gone around the world. Well, not around the world, but around the country and all of Mexico. So hopefully they'll like go study in Guadalajara and go to the university there. I'm already dreaming up their lives. They're only 5 and 7, you guys. So. They're not leaving the nest anytime soon.
What we have to do.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny though, even in the conversation, and it kind of will align today with today's topic of purpose, is talking about little stickers that the kids are like now putting those stickers all over their Nalgene bottles and at different places that they bring to school. And so I told my husband when he went to this like holistic restaurant that we go to that's vegan locally, I'm like, get them like a cool, healthy sticker because we're going to armor these kids with all the things that they need to be armored with so that they are just rocking like just God in all the ways that he would have us do it versus some of the like Pokemon stickers. Not that there's nothing against Pokemon, but you know how it feels.
Yeah.
It's awesome. All right, I see Michelle has tuned in. She's also in Virginia Beach. Michelle, I love you. Thanks for being here.
Well, we're going to dive in. Today, we are talking all about purpose, and we are so excited to chat with you and to just glean from your wisdom and your experience. You wrote an article in our August feature all about this thing called the ikigai. And I love that you have to lift your cheeks up when you say it, aka smile.
That's awesome. I hadn't thought about that. That's so true.
You have to smile when you say ikigai, which is so fun.
I had to tell it to the gals that I was coaching, and I just went after ikigai because I'm always with women. And so I'm like, you can remember this, okay? Remember? But the difference is versus the ikigai. The ikigai is so much more about joy and hope. And eventually what we're going to get into today is purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so let's just dive right into that. So we are talking all about purpose today. Can you tell us what is purpose?
You know, I had that question in the lineup for today and I was like, goodness, where do you even start? Because I feel like purpose and the word calling and like vocation even are so thrown around by society today that I don't want to give it a definition that doesn't honor God. Because I think so often we have the ability to do that and grasp hold of our vocation as our identity, but ultimately our purpose is rooted in here, right? Like, is to know that we are here with purpose on his behalf. And at any given moment, we could not be here. And so our purpose, no matter what our vocation or what our individual mission is all ultimately rooted in the exact same thing. And that's being a son or a daughter of the King Most High. And so does your purpose look like my purpose in that identity factor? No, but that doesn't mean that it's any less or more important. Every purpose that you live out has deep, deep rooted meaning to the heart of the Lord.
Absolutely. And it's different in every season, right? It changes.
That's so true. It's so true. So like even on a cellular, like molecular level, every year our body changes every 7 years on a molecular level. So to know that through that we are shifting and growing, and I always love to say always becoming, because I feel like there's no opportunity where we should be shifting backwards. Though, of course, we go through seasons of hardship and trouble and dissection even of what am I here for? Who am I here? And how do you want to walk in that authority and purpose? But I believe that there's this ever becoming, always becoming shedding process of who we're supposed to be, and that purpose and identity factor.
So tell us about the Ikigai. How did you find it? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I was actually reading this book called Boss Up. It's a really cool, vibrant book, and it says on it as its catchphrase, "Not your average mama's business book." And it's really bright and colorful. And if you ever find me on the internet, I have rainbow everything. So it's kind of ironic that I'm wearing black today because I'm super bright. And I loved owning that part of who I am. And so when I got gifted this book from someone who does not know me at all, it was a trade at an office gathering for Christmas. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I was so overjoyed by this book. She probably thought I was a little crazy. Now, mind you, it wasn't rooted in anything Christian. And I have been on a journey in my own discovery of purpose for the last 4.5 years, where I'm very mindful of what goes into this and what goes into these and what goes into these and into my heart. And so I didn't read it initially. And it was around Christmas time that I was going on vacation with my family. And I'm like, oh, let's have some lighthearted reading. I'm usually a podcaster and a listener of all things. But when I'm on a beach, I want a book, because it's too hot to have any electronics around you. And so I was introduced to this through an author and a lighthearted read. And as I was dissecting it, and I'm gonna pop over and share on my screen here in a second what that looks like, this diagram and this concept, I immediately felt just a conviction of the Lord. Okay, here's something that I've gifted this woman or this time for you, and I want you to see it through my lens. And I think that there's such power in that as we look to discover our purpose, to realize that there is a lens of the Lord that he wants you to put on in everything that you do. And that gives you this amazing opportunity to see things that the world would deem less than or simple or not of great purpose with great purpose. And so one of those areas that immediately triggers for me is motherhood. Some people see this as the biggest honor, and it absolutely is. And it's a part of my calling and a part of most women who are a mom's calling, but it's not the only purpose God has you on this planet for. And so she actually unpacks this in the story, which is what really touched me, is to realize that concept of mom guilt and why that's been blanketed on women in the way that we steward our lives. So I went in to discover this Ikigai concept. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I'm using the wrong mouse pad over here.
And while you do that, I was reading a little bit about it, and listening as we were preparing. And I love that it originated in Okinawa.
Yes, how cool is that, right? I love that. And my sister actually lived in Okinawa for 3 years, and I never got to visit, and I absolutely should have. So you guys can see the diagram here. And this diagram, again, is from a worldly view that I believe I was revealed an additional layer as I was understanding it and really unpacking it and putting it into play with what scripture says, who we are, whose we are, and the life that we should be living here on earth. And so it means, Icky actually derives from the word life, and Gai derives from the word value or worth. So it's living a life of value or worth, or as they describe it, your reason for being. And it's the intersection point, the center point here of this chart that is the true ikigai, the true reason for being. And in this Japanese culture, when they understood what it was, there's all this scientific proof that if you can discover your purpose, if you know your purpose and you know your why, you have the ability to tap into a joy unprecedented that can get you to the lifelong years of 120, right? And live into your hundreds. And I know for me, I want to be here for so many of my children's generation to generation, my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. And I want to see what God has in store for all of our generations. And in order for me to do that, it's not just a matter of what I practice and also preach about mind, body, and soul well-being, but it's doing so under the understanding of our actual reason for being. And so here's the chart, and obviously we know, like, do what you love. We hear this all the time. You know, stay in line with what you're good at, and what does the world need? And then the business concept of what can you get paid for? And, you know, taking that through the lens of the Lord, realizing that God is an abundant God, and he wants wealth for us. And wealth doesn't necessarily mean what you can get paid for by the green, you know, the coins or whatever it is that you want to look at, but the wealth of the fruit, and the fruits of the Spirit being 7 of goodness and faithfulness and joy and peace and faithfulness. Help me. What are the other ones? Love, of course, and joy. Yes, joy. And so realizing that what we can be paid for through the fruits of the spirits versus just monetizing. And then if you go a level into that diagram, you see passion, mission, profession, and vocation. And if you go into the article that I submitted for Bible and Pop Culture Magazine, you'll see that I viewed it less like a cylindrical time, hourly experience where you would go through the circle, but in parallel to one another. So what you love versus what you can get paid for, what are you good at, and what the world needs, alongside passion and profession, mission and vocation, because I believe that there's this counterbalance experience that if you don't have one, or you have one, you're going to be dissatisfied in the other area, which when you go to that final inner layer, before you get to the realm of ikigai, you see those light faded, non-titled, but they're titled on the outer ring. So satisfied by feeling, but feeling useless is opposite to entertained and purposeful, but feeling unfulfilled. So useless versus unfulfilled are counterbalancing. And then the same thing for delightful and fulfilled, but broke, being opposite to what can you get paid for, and comfortable perhaps in your wealth, but bored and empty because you're not actually doing what you love.
Yeah.
And so realizing that that center point is putting all of those things at play in one given moment. And it feels, when you're looking at it from that perspective, that that can be a really hard thing to do. Yes. And ultimately, I feel like, again, if we can reference back to what he says and who he says we are, these things become ever evolving, and he continues to reveal our purpose within us.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm gonna do this. That is perfect. So in your article, you wrote, and I'm gonna read it from your article here. It says, when we know him and identify ourselves as his children, we start to recognize our purpose placement here on earth through our uniquely designed imprints. Can you unpack those words?
Yeah. So I believe that we all obviously, knowing that our imprint is completely different than anybody who we live with, even very, very close genetically, my siblings, my parents, any of those things. I'm here on earth with a unique practice. And even as I read that book and it referenced, sorry, I've got messages coming in. Let me click that out of there. Even as I read that book, and I'm thinking to myself in that very moment, goodness, this book, I feel like I could have written this. And now I can't write this book because it's already been written. And I get the opportunity and the gift of walking alongside women as a business coach to help blossom their understanding of what their purpose is and bring that to life in their businesses. And so often this is the stumbling point. This is I'm not worthy enough. I'm no different than this person and they've already done it, so now I don't need to do it. Or what am I going to say that's different than this other person who has 5 million followers and I have 500? I'll just let them speak on my behalf. When God has uniquely called you to speak your truth, which is ultimately his truth, because your lens is different than anybody else's. So my pastor at our local church, Bridge, he had said that we look through our eyes. We don't look with our eyes. And what that means is that we look through the life experiences, the trials and tribulations, the things that we've been taught, the churches we've gone to, even the style of denomination we are in, or the type of Bible that we're reading, or anything that we've consumed, right? I'm a millennial, so looking through it from a generational lens, looking through it from, I'm not going to go political because that is not me at all, but through a political lens, right? We're looking through our eyes. And therefore, with all of those things, I am absolutely 100% different than every single other person. And so it's so necessary for us to stand in that authority and stand in that recognition of our identity in who we are, that he has gifted us this opportunity to show up for him and show up for him in such a unique way, because we are all designed differently.
Yes. So let's say we've found our, we've figured out where we are on this chart. So how do we, and we're learning about our identity and we're starting to see that we have a unique perspective and set of words that only we can share. So how do we move forward? What's the next step?
You know, I think that is also a variation for every person, and realizing the first thing that I mentioned before is, what's the counterbalance of where you are right now? If you're in one side of the chart, look at the opposing side, because often that means that you're missing something in that realm. If you want to use ikigai as your specific reference for purpose, you notated that there are, a bunch of other opportunities for us to understand who we are through things like Enneagram or strengths and weak tests that we could do, or when you go to a job, they try to put you on the Myers-Briggs, or all of these earthly, worldly understandings of self. And I think that they're valuable. I learned so much even in therapy alongside my husband about the Enneagram and who he is at a more centered core level. But all of those things have a Christian view, a Christian perspective, because there are people like me and there are people like you that want to take what the world has deemed right in the eyes of man and the eyes of flesh, and we want to give it back to God. And so submitting your purpose before him in either a state of repentance and knowing, like, God, I have tried so hard to pursue what I love, and yet I am still completely broke. And so we're looking at it completely through a lens of wealth and feeling like because we haven't acquired money in what we're doing and we're struggling, that we are living out of purpose. Yeah. Or on the contrary, I have accumulated a very huge amount of wealth, and yet I'm completely vacant and void because I don't love what I'm doing. I hate it. In fact, I go to work simply to make the dollar, and I come back, and instead of feeling satisfied and fulfilled and happy with the hours that I just put into the world and wasted away from my family, I now am going to use a coping mechanism or a coping strategy to find fulfillment. And because of what we're faced with nowadays and everything being less than anything that you can find within God, we are choosing routes that are then pulling us further away from our purpose. And I can say that with truth because I experienced it, whether it be with alcohol, whether it be with shopping, whether it be with media, whether it be with Netflix, and really zoning out into these alternative worlds that aren't true and aren't real. Y'all, I was a Bachelor fan for years, and it was a part of what destroyed my understanding of love, my understanding of marriage. And that seems so silly and like how juvenile of me, but at the same time, I wasn't walking with the Lord. So my wisdom in love and my wisdom in understanding my purpose within my marriage only came when I was able to repent what I thought was right and activate what is true. And I'm going to keep holding this up because it's literally, none of this is me. None of this is things that I own as righteous, but instead what God has shown me and revealed to me in my quiet times with him and in my hardships.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to sit with that. Like, you know, the fact that we can pull ourselves away from our purpose by the things that we spend our time doing, even if we feel like it's an opportunity to just unwind, you know. But even then there's purpose in those times.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's a part of how I am where I am today and able to make the choices that I am today because I did walk through those difficulties. And I don't want there to be shame or guilt if you're sitting inside of the Ikigai and you feel completely deterred from your purpose or out of alignment, because God is good. And he is greater than the place that you are right now. And he gives open-armed access to a seat at his table at every given moment. And it doesn't say that immediately upon my recognition of self that I became holier than thou and was able to see that this is the purpose I'm supposed to be living out. That is not the process. God is a God of patience, and he is a God of resilience and of building us up. And that process takes time, and that process takes energy, and it takes submission of self to understand yourself through him. And so it was a hard journey. It's still hard. There's still moments I'm constantly checking myself and always becoming, like I said before. So giving yourself that grace to realize it's more about that recognition and that immediate understanding of repentance. And for us to slowly understand that we can trade those things for things that are better. And you can then find yourself resting in that center point and that alignment point so much better because your eyes are fixated vertically versus fixated horizontally on the things that you don't have, but instead on the things that you do have within your purpose. And you have life, and you have breath in your lungs, and you have opportunity, and you're here right now. And I hope if you're listening to this, you realize that this is something for everyone, and that unique factor everyone has, and you are a part of that everyone. And so to bring voice and to bring light to those places that you've perhaps hid out of shame. Part of our stories, those hard points, those trials and tribulations are exactly why you are called to do what you're called to do. So when you think biblically of calling and you think biblically of purpose, you can think of really difficult stories like the story of David, where he was called to be king, yet he was in a pasture, right? Like the least of his brothers, the smallest of the clan. And yet he was called to be someone mighty and someone who had to face hardships and got to stand and show his talent and strength with what he did in that wilderness place, in that place where no one recognized him. And then even on the cave. Yeah, exactly. And then even on the throne where he stepped into a situation with Bathsheba, where he was then tainted and taunted and walked out of alignment. And so realizing that just because we find our purpose, there's going to be even more trial and tribulations and more opportunities where the serpents are going to show up in our life. And we then still have a choice. And we might not always choose what God would hope for us to do. But in his repentance, in his coming back to alignment and realizing what he did, submitting those hardships, submitting those problems, and realizing, oh my God, literally, oh my God, let me stand back in your honor. Let me stand back in your grace, and let me walk out what this true purpose is that you have for me in this new, sanctified, more empathizing heart. Because I know through my hardships, I have the ability to empathize with people who have walked through similar decisions that suck, that are heavy, that feel really hard. And yet I have now the opportunity to say, but you can do it through him who strengthens you.
Yeah. And I love that we have an opportunity to see physically in front of us this tool. So, you know, as we gain understanding about ourselves, as we gain perspective from the past and our experiences, we now can just put this in front of us daily and say, like, where am I? And be honest with that. And then move around in that as we feel like, you know, as we just are still navigating, like you said, it's a daily. Yeah.
And I think too, like realizing even in that obviously the end goal of the ikigai is that every component of our life is centered, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not there. Even in the places where I am like on cloud 9 and I know, God, you have put me in this position. I feel like that right now in this very moment. Yeah. But at the very same moment, I'm like, I had to part ways with my daughter who didn't want to leave me after her first week of school. And I do feel that mom guilt. And I do feel like, oh, baby, I want to be with you too. Or with my husband who deserves my time and energy. And here I am choosing this. Does that mean I'm out of alignment in my marriage or in my motherhood? Maybe not, because I'm here with you and I feel like I'm doing what the Lord has called me to do for such a time as this. Mm-hmm. But it's the recognition that we are always, again, I'm going to go back to it, we're always becoming. And God is continuing to show me and showcase that my view of motherhood that was implanted since childhood is not the type of motherhood that I'm walking out right now, or that he has gifted for me. And for me to be able to stand in authority in those places and say, you guys, I get to share the truth with the world in moments like this. Yes. And yet I know you're in safe, capable hands with your Father who loves you dearly, who now gets to pour into you in this moment without me. Because I think that's a very important role of fatherhood in our children's lives.
So good.
There's so much to it. I could keep talking forever. I guess I just really want people to find freedom. I want them to realize that no matter where you are on the chart on any given moment, on any component of your life, there is opportunity, and that God is literally beckoning you. And it's not a matter of, you know, David was a king, that example that I gave you, but think about all the women in the Bible that we don't often talk about. Think about Rahab. Think that she was, you know, within the walls of the place that we, the chosen people, were intended to go. And she was acting as a prostitute. And yet she was called, even in that mess, to be the safe harbor for the people that God had in his army that needed to go in and scour the land and be the eyes to be able to invade that territory. And so she opened her doors against the kingdom's rules, against the ruler's rules, in order to do something that she knew in her heart of hearts she was supposed to do. Yeah. And so we have the beautiful gift every given day to say yes to that calling. And it might feel really insignificant to you in parallel to the social media numbers of someone you follow. And I'm currently on a social media fast. And so I'm showing up on Facebook, but through a third party. And I have people doing the things, but I want us to remember that none of those numbers matter. Mm. That in the eyes of God, we are all puzzle pieces to this grand puzzle. And I do puzzles often with my son. It's his time of like peace and our time of quiet together, because he is rambunctious every other minute of the day. And there's like this utter frustration and letdown when I lose a puzzle piece, because I've come into this beautiful picture that is on the box that God has planned for such a time as this, for today. It's our puzzle piece of today. We don't have to look at it for the longevity of life and feel insignificant in that teeny, 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 tiny piece of eternity. Let's just look at today. And you're the puzzle piece that he's missing because you decided to say no, or you decided to stay complacent, or you decided to stay comfortable, or you decided to turn your eyes to the magnitude of the flock because it's comfortable to be with the flock. And yet you're the one that he's called out today to say, I need you in this difficult situation. I need you to stand up in this specific time because your voice matters. Yeah. And so being called, which is what we circled back to at the beginning of this conversation, what is calling? Being called isn't glamorous. Yeah. Being called isn't about the social media numbers. Being called isn't about the glory, honestly. It's about his glory, but not the glory that we get here on earth. It's about those fruits that we spoke about. Yeah. It's about the identity factor that you get to trade, like me as the woman at the well going in this hardship and then sitting next to Jesus and him saying, this is not who you are. I've called you to be more. Now go back and act as I would have you act. She gets to step out of shame. You get to step out of guilt. You get to step out of the places of lonely and realize that you are forever in eternity a part of a family, a part of a kingship, a sonship, a daughtership, that you are a part of a princess. You're in a court that is impenetrable. Mm. And that's your identity.
Yes, I love that. And that is truly your life's purpose. Getting back to that, what the ikigai stands for, life's purpose. We all have a place here because of that. Yeah.
So good. So true.
So well, we are going to open it up. If anybody has any questions in the chat that they wanted to ask Tamra or myself about this topic, go ahead and just ask them there. And while we wait for that, one more question I wanted to bring up is, sometimes you talked about we are, we're in a job and we're making a lot of money, but we're not satisfied, I heard somebody talk about the ikigai as maybe starting part-time, that 5 to 9 a.m. and then the 5 to 9 p.m. and the times that you had mentioned that perhaps we would turn our eyes to something else. So what would you say to us in this time, especially where we find ourselves in our culture and in the state of the world? Like, how do we take one step forward into our ikigai, even if it's in the part-time moments of our day,
Yeah. Okay, so this is my ikigai, y'all. This is like where I rest, where I reside. I love it so much because one, I've done it. I've been there from the wee hours of the morning. My hour, for some reason, God likes 3 a.m. So it doesn't feel as good as 5 a.m. But I've been there, and I have recently, within the last year, done the switch where I get to step out of those early in-between hours, and I get to do it all the time. And I will tell you, it's a space of abundance, but it was because of the saying yes and the obedience and the consistency of saying yes in those wee hours and in those nighttime hours when I could have been doing something relaxing, if you will. It was relaxing for me because I was pursuing that space of joy, and it should be and will be for you as well. But the one small thing is just stay obedient. Just stay consistent. If you are leaning into something that fulfills you on a level that 9 to 5 can't or won't or can never, then you stay there as often as you possibly can until that flip happens in your life, and it will. Because when you look at that chart and you look at the ikigai, you get to see in those places, like I said, of counterbalance, how can I get closer to that center point? How can I come further into alignment here? And it's the understanding of that parallel of where you are. So one thing that I often put my clients on when they're discovering that ikigai or activating in those consistent odd hours is really understanding your root why. And I too believe that's a process of becoming, because I think we're constantly revealed our why as situations emerge, as people come into our life. Like I can name just in the last 6 weeks a why factor that developed that I didn't know before, even though I felt like I was activating in my ikigai. And so it's asking yourself why like 10 times in the same setting. So you ask yourself why, and you have an answer, and you can journal this, you can just reflect on it. And then you ask yourself, once you come to a halt factor, why about that thing? And then you ask yourself again. And this too is actually in the book around ikigai that I read called Boss Up. We'll give it as a reference link for her book because it is really good. Is just this continual questions, just always reflecting, always asking yourself these questions. And I specifically say that question is why. She has a plethora of other questions. And you're going to come to a point where emotion overtakes you, where the core of who you are is so strong that you are fulfilled and filled with just either gratitude, understanding. For me, because I'm a woman, was a lot of tears that were very pretty, of knowing like, holy moly, all of those reasons, all of those hardships, all of the moments where I was crying in solitude and frustration and fear, they come to a head within your ikigai. And that's the release. That's that freedom factor to say, God, instead of why did I go through those things? God says, this is why. And now you get to trade in servitude to all of the people around you within the kingdom. Your why now becomes a part of the storyline of them coming to know the Lord. Because ultimately, as a daughter or a son, I believe all of our whys are rooted in the fact that we are here with purpose, to make heaven crowded, to make it a party, and to shed light on the fact that we are not alone in this walk.
Yeah. So good. We are getting to a time to wrap up, but we do have a question and I want to make sure that we answer it. So Michelle started off saying, now that you know what you know, if you could go back and do one thing differently, what would it be? Or what is one big change you have made over time because of what you know?
That's a really good question. So I feel like in the midst of hardship and in the hindsight 2020 experience, it's really easy in that time to say, oh, I wish I would have not done those things. And I would have not wandered. I would have stayed in alignment with the Lord, since even in the midst of hurt and I could have had my eyes opened earlier to this, but I wouldn't change anything. And I think that if we could rest as a society in that, even right now with huge cultural conversations that we're having around race, around political differences, y'all, we can't change anything. What we have the gift of doing is changing today, of being that puzzle piece that shows up in God's vision and activating in those spaces to say, God, I see you and I know my purpose, and the God within me says yes, even against fear and failure. Yes. And so the biggest change that I've made after recognizing those areas as tools that God currently pulls on me for on a given basis as good things versus hard things is that every single day I have an opportunity. And that opportunity is either to say yes or to turn my eyes. And because I lived a life of turning my eyes for so long, and because I lived restless nights of no sleep and guilt and shame, I know what it feels like. I don't want to be there anymore. And so even in the days that are hard, I say yes as often as I possibly can and know how to, in order for me to have the joy factor that ikigai experience just of the day. Remember, we're talking about today, because sometimes it's really hard to think of myself as a 120-year-old woman gifting my great-great-grandchildren wisdom. But today I can.
Yeah.
Right? So that's my change agent. That's my factor, is to just say yes today.
Yeah. Yes, that's so good. Just say yes today in obedience. Yeah. So good. Well, thank you, Tamra. Thank you so much for spending this time with us and pouring into our community and sharing your journey. We have been enriched, absolutely enriched today. And like you said, we will make sure to get that resource in the links of our chat. And if you guys are watching this when after we are not live anymore, please don't hesitate to reach out to us in the comments. At Bible and Pop Culture, we are all about engaging. We are here with you. We want to walk through all of the topics that we talk about with you, and building a community around the things that God has given us a passion for and purpose in our lives. So let's continue this conversation and say yes.
Yes.
Say yes.
Sandy and Sean, we saw what you said in the comments. I'm so glad you showed up for this conversation, everyone who's live. And if you do have any thoughts and want to drop them afterwards and you're doing a replay, give us a hashtag replay and ask your question, and I'll be sure to chime in indirectly since I'm on a fast, but I'll have people giving me the comments to give you guys some more truth and some more understanding of this, because I truly do feel like it's ultimate freedom factor, and I want us to live a more free life.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for the honor of being here. I'm so amazed by what you and Nia and the Bible and Pop Culture team are doing. And it's truly fundamental for what I believe we're going to need as a shift in society for the moving forward, for everyone to be in that freedom factor. It's a deeper understanding of our purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Aloha.